Well, folks, gather round. It's family therapy time. Except the family in question built a golden tower with their name on it, and one of them became, well, Mary L. Trump, niece of the 45th president, decided to write a tell-all. Her book, Too Much and Never Enough, is not exactly a Hallmark card to the Trumps. It's more like if you took a Hallmark card, dipped it in acid, and then wrote, "You broke America" on it in glitter glue. Now, we're used to Trump stories being loud, messy, and full of questionable claims. But Mary's book hit differently. She's a clinical psychologist. She grew up in the belly of the beast, so to speak. This isn't just gossip. It's an analysis of how a family's dysfunction can literally impact the world. Buckle up, because where the Trumps are concerned, it's going to be a bumpy ride. So, what did we learn? Aside from the fact that money can't buy you love, a healthy family dynamic, just the things. Let's talk about Fred Trump, Donald's dad. A real estate tycoon, patriarch, and by most accounts not a warm and fuzzy guy. Imagine him less like a cuddly grandpa and more like the Monopoly man come to life, but crueler. Mary paints a picture of a household run on competition, not love. It's like Succession, but with worse haircuts. Fred, according to Mary, ruled with an iron fist and a very specific parenting philosophy. Winning was everything. Weakness was to be mocked, and emotions? Those were for suckers. This wasn't a family dinner table, it was a Shark Tank, and only one Trump could be the biggest fish. Now, we've all had family dinners that felt tense, right? But imagine that pressure cooker environment shaping a future president. Maybe we should have sent the Trumps a family therapist instead of the nuclear codes. Just a thought. Fathers and sons, a tale as old as time. But in the Trump family it gets complicated. See, Fred had a particular way of dealing with his kids. He favored Donald, dubbing him the killer and the king. This wasn't just praise, it was a pressure cooker of expectations. Meanwhile, Donald's older brother Freddie faced constant criticism and belittlement. This wasn't just sibling rivalry, it was a full-on demolition derby of self-worth. And where was young Donald during all this? Learning, observing, internalizing the idea that cruelty equals strength and empathy is for losers. The message was clear: to please Dad you had to be. You had to win no matter the cost. And boy did Donald ever take notes. He basically took that lesson plan and turned it into a presidency. Now, being the chosen one sounds great, right? Like getting extra cookies and never having to do chores. But in the Trump household it was more like a gilded cage. Donald, according to Mary, could do no wrong in Fred's eyes. Every boast, every exaggeration was met with approval. Consequences? Those were for other people's kids. This created a fascinating paradox. Donald, the supposed winner, was actually robbed of something crucial: the ability to fail, learn, and grow. He became, in Mary's words, a fragile ego, constantly needing affirmation. Sound familiar? Like maybe a guy who can't accept losing an election? Just saying. This wasn't just about spoiling a kid, it was about creating a warped sense of reality. And that, my friends, is how you end up with a grown man who tweets insults at celebrities at 3 a.m. Section 5. Mary sees all the perils of being the outsider. Now, where do I fit into all this? I'm Freddie's daughter, Donald's niece. And if the Trumps were a sitcom, I'd be the witty, observant neighbor always commenting on the absurdity of it all. But this wasn't a sitcom, it was my life. I witnessed the favoritism, the cruelty, the emotional neglect. I saw how it warped Donald and broke Freddie. And being the outsider gave me a unique perspective. I could see the strings being pulled, the damage being done, while everyone else was caught in the drama. My book isn't just a juicy tell-all, it's a cry for understanding. It's saying, hey, this is what happens when you raise kids in a pressure cooker of wealth and zero empathy. And you know what? I've got a point. Mary L. Trump, Freddie's daughter and Donald's niece, provides a unique perspective on the Trump family dynamics. She witnessed the favoritism, the cruelty, and the emotional neglect that shaped her uncle and broke her father. Her book serves as a cry for understanding, highlighting the consequences of raising children in a pressure cooker of wealth and zero empathy. Section 6. Money, money, money can't buy you love or sanity. Here's a fun fact. The Trumps are rich, like really, really rich. And you know what they say about money? It doesn't buy happiness. It also doesn't buy you a functional family, a sense of empathy, or the ability to admit when you're wrong. Who knew? Mary argues that the Trump fortune wasn't just a backdrop, it was an enabler. It allowed Fred to create a world where his rules were law, and his approval was the only currency that mattered. It insulated me from consequences, making me believe I was invincible. Think of it like this: money was the water the Trumps swam in. It shaped their behavior, their values, their entire worldview. And when your worldview is that money equals power equals right, well, let's just say it doesn't exactly scream empathetic leader of the free world. Section 7. The making of a strong man. It starts at home. Now, we're not saying that growing up Trump turned you into a Bond villain, but it's hard to ignore the parallels between Donald's upbringing and, well, his entire presidency. The constant need for praise, the inability to handle criticism, the tendency to lash out when challenged. Those aren't just personality quirks, they're coping mechanisms honed over decades. According to Mary, I learned early on that aggression was rewarded, vulnerability was weakness, and facts were, let's say, flexible. I became a master of manipulation, a connoisseur of chaos, because that's how you survived in the Trump household. It's like that old saying, hurt people, but in this case the hurt person had access to nuclear codes and a Twitter account, so, slightly higher stakes. Section 8. From boardroom to situation room, same chaos, different stakes. Here's the thing about family dynamics. They don't magically disappear when you grow up. They follow you, they whisper in your ear, they influence your decisions, even when you don't realize it. And when your family dynamics are basically a season of House of Cards, well, that can be a problem. Mary argues that the chaos and dysfunction of the Trump family business wasn't just bad business. It was a training ground for the White House. The constant infighting, the backstabbing, the disregard for rules. That wasn't a bug, it was a feature. It's almost impressive, in a terrifying way. Donald took the lessons he learned at the family dinner table and applied them to international diplomacy. The result? Let's just say it wasn't world peace and a Nobel Prize, more like a Twitter war with the Prime Minister of Denmark. Section 9. Can you inherit narcissism? Asking for a nation. Now, let's be clear. We're not diagnosing anyone with anything from afar. That's a job for professionals, preferably ones who aren't writing comedic essays, but Mary does raise an interesting point. Can you inherit narcissism? She argues that while it's not genetic, the environment you grow up in plays a huge role. And when your environment is basically a 24/7 ego-stroking machine, well, it's not exactly fertile ground for empathy or self-awareness. It's like trying to grow a rose in a desert. Possible? Maybe. Likely? Not so much. And in Donald's case, it seems the desert he grew up in had gold-plated faucets and a never-ending supply of Diet Coke. Section 10. The ripple effect, toxic families, wounded world. So what's the takeaway from all this? Besides the fact that we need a stiff drink and a therapy session, Mary's book isn't just about one dysfunctional family, it's about the ripple effect of trauma. It's about how the wounds we inherit and inflict on each other can have far-reaching consequences. The Trumps might be an extreme case, but they're a reminder that behind the headlines, the Twitter rants, the political circus, are real people with complex histories. And those histories matter. They shape our leaders, our policies, our world. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That the dysfunction of one family could impact the lives of millions. But it's also a call to action. Because if we want to create a better world, we have to start by understanding the forces that shape us. Even the uncomfortable, messy, Trump-shaped ones. Section 11. Beyond the headlines. A lesson in empathy. Maybe. Look, it's easy to mock the Trumps. It's like shooting fish in a barrel, except the barrel is made of gold and the fish tweet angrily about their hair. But Mary's book asks us to do something more difficult to understand, to see the humanity, however flawed, behind the caricature. This doesn't excuse Donald's actions, nor does it absolve him of responsibility, but it does offer a glimpse into the why, and maybe, just maybe, that understanding can help us heal, as a nation, and as individuals. Because if we can find a shred of empathy for the Trumps, imagine what we can do for each other. So the next time you see a Trump headline and feel your blood pressure rising, take a deep breath, remember Mary's story. Remember that behind every outrageous tweet, every baffling decision is a lifetime of experiences, some more dysfunctional than others. It might not make you feel better, but hey, at least it'll give you something to talk about in therapy.